everybody. I hope you've been enjoying some time outside with this nice spring weather. I hope you've had fun with your family, and I want to say thank you for working so hard every day and listening to these read-alouds. Here's the note catcher that you need for today, front and back. Our title of today's read-aloud is Further Adventures of Christopher Columbus. And before we get started, I want you to remember from yesterday's lesson that Christopher Columbus was really happy because he thought he had landed in the Indies in Asia. Okay, but we know that he wasn't actually in the Indies of Asia. He landed in a different land that he didn't even know existed called the Americas. Okay, and once he got there, he realized that there wasn't as much gold there as he had expected, and also there was already a large group of people living there. And I didn't tell this to you yesterday, but we've learned about these people before. They're called the Native Americans. Okay, I hope you remember, it was a while ago now, but I had made this big chart next to my rocking chair at the front of the room. And remember, on the chart we had the Lakota Sioux tribe, the Wampanoag tribe, and we learned about the different food that they eat. We learned about the shelters that they live in, like teepees and weetus. We learned that some tribes would eat shellfish if they lived near the ocean, and we learned about how the Lakota Sioux tribe would eat buffalo because they lived in the Great Plains where there was lots of buffalo who would eat the grass, and they would use the buffalo skin to make their clothes and things like that. I hope you remember learning about that because that'll help you with today's read aloud. So when Christopher Columbus got to this land, there was a Native American tribe living there called the Taino tribe, and they were a very peaceful tribe. They lived in large huts, and they had a lot of ceremonies and group games. Remember we learned about powwows? They had those too. And they had been living on this land for a long, long time before Christopher Columbus had even gotten there. Okay? Also remember that at the end of the last read-aloud, Columbus and some of his crew members had just returned to Spain to the palace of King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, and they had brought back some gold, some fruit, some tropical parrots, and some other goods. And remember, the king and queen were so happy and excited, and they said, we'll pay for you to go back. You can be the governor of this new land that you found, and they were really proud of him. What I might not have told you yesterday is that only Christopher Columbus and some of his crew had gone back to Spain to see the king and queen. Some of them had stayed back in the new land with the Native Americans. And in today's read aloud, you're going to find out what they had been doing there while Christopher Columbus was back in Spain with the king and queen. Okay, so also remember that the king and queen told him that you can go back and we'll help pay for it. And I want you to make a guess right now. See if you can predict. What do you think Christopher Columbus is going to do when he gets back to that land, Hispaniola, where the Native Americans are living? Okay. And then listen carefully to hear if Columbus ever finds what he sets out to find and if your idea is correct. See if your prediction is correct. Okay? So this is called Further Adventures of Christopher Columbus. When Christopher Columbus set sail for Europe for the second time, he commanded not 3, but 17 ships. So remember the first time he went, he had the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. He only had 3 ships. Now he has 17 ships. And he told himself, I will return to Hispaniola and find the men I left on that island waiting to help me. We will find the wealth of Asia and we will be rich. Everything seemed to work perfectly. So remember, he still thinks he had landed in Asia, but all of us know that that's not where he actually was. Okay? But the most important word in that statement is seemed. Everything seemed to be working out perfectly. In fact, this time Columbus was sailing straight into trouble. So what do you think is going to happen this time? Think about it. Tell someone around you. Reaching Hispaniola, he found that the fort his men had assembled from the wooden planks of the Santa Maria was gone. There was no sign of the sailors he had left there either. Something was terribly wrong. Columbus spoke with a few of the native island people whom he still insisted on calling Indians. So remember, the people from the Taino tribe were not Indians from a place called India. They were actually Native Americans. He learned that while he was away, the Spanish crew had been unkind to the native people and had taken advantage of them. So remember, I told you that when Columbus had gone back to Spain to see the king and queen, he left some of his crew members back in this place. And it says that while he was gone, his crew members were not being kind to the Native Americans who lived there. Okay, it says that they were taking advantage of them. And if you take advantage of someone, it means that you treat them unfairly and for selfish reasons. Okay, so while he was gone, his crew was not being very nice to the Native Americans. Okay, so your next question says, or your first question says, what happened on the island of Hispaniola while Columbus was back in Spain? So you could say his crew members were, and what were they doing? And you're going to find out a little bit more in a minute. Okay, so as I keep going, pay attention to what else his crew members did to the Native Americans. Columbus had originally come in peace, but his greediness and the greediness of his sailors had changed things on the island. The men who had sailed with Columbus on his second voyage also treated the natives badly and were just as greedy for treasure. Once more, Columbus and his crew took advantage of the natives. They were forced to work for no pay, carving mines into the high mountainsides. There is no gold in those mountains, Columbus and his men told one another, and we did not sail all this way to leave it there, but they did not find as much gold as they had expected. Okay, so they were treating the Native Americans pretty badly, and I want to show you this picture a little closer. And we learned about the Native Americans, and we learned that what good people they are, and so it wasn't nice that they were forcing them to do all this work. So let me read that part again of what they were making them do. Columbus and his crew took advantage of the natives. They were forced to work for no pay and carve into mines on the high mountainside. There's gold in those mountains, Columbus and his men told one another, and we did not sail all this way to leave it there. Okay, so what do you think it looks like Columbus and his men were forcing the Native Americans to do with the mountains? And that's the answer to your next question. It says, what did Columbus and his men force the Native Americans to do? You could say they forced them to start with an uppercase letter and end with a period, please. All right. When Columbus returned to Spain from the second voyage, the king and queen did not like the report that he gave them. Isabella said, "We will let you sail a third time for us, but you had better find more spices and more gold this time." So Columbus went all the way back to Spain again, and the king and queen were upset. They said, "You didn't get us enough stuff. You didn't get us enough gold or spices. We want you to go back a third time." Okay? So on his third voyage, Columbus thought, "Surely this time I will find a city rich with gold and spices like those I have heard about." But all he saw were just jungles. Okay, so why won't he find the Asian city? Why is he not finding the Asian city that he thinks he needs to get to? During his search, Columbus became very sick, weak, and discouraged. He ordered his men to head for Hispaniola. And when they got there, Columbus was surprised to find that a nobleman sent by Ferdinand and Isabella was waiting for him. The reason the king and queen had sent the nobleman is because they heard after the second voyage that Columbus was treating the native people cruelly and was keeping the gold for himself. Okay, so when Columbus got back to Hispaniola, he found that there was a nobleman waiting for him. And the nobleman was a person who was sent there by the king and queen. Because the king and queen are angry at him. Okay, and hopefully you know why they're angry at him. The nobleman had been ordered to spy on Columbus and to arrest him if this turned out to be true, that he was treating the Native Americans unfairly. Indeed, the nobleman heard from many people on the island how Columbus and his men had mistreated the Native American people of Hispaniola. The nobleman announced, "Christopher Columbus, you are being charged with keeping all the gold and treasures for yourself, and therefore doing a terrible job as governor." Remember, the king and queen had told him that he could be governor of this new land? The king and queen will decide your fate. So now Columbus is going to jail. And they didn't have jails in Hispaniola, so Columbus had to be taken all the way back to Spain to be sent to jail. So I want you to think with your family right now, why is he being sent to jail? What is he in trouble for? What did he do wrong? Columbus sailed the long journey home to Spain, not as the ship's commander as he had once been, but as a prisoner heading to jail. He wondered how he would be greeted by King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella. So what do you think the king and queen are going to do to him? What do you think is going to happen to Columbus? Okay. All right, so your next question says, what happened to Columbus on his third voyage? What happened to him the third time he got there? All right. At first, when Columbus arrived in Spain, he was thrown in jail. Later, when he appeared before the king and queen, they were shocked by the difference in the man they now saw before them. His hair had turned completely white, his body had grown bent and weak, and the man who had boldly stepped forward in the past now limped into their presence. King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella were ashamed. Ashamed means that they felt badly and guiltily for what they had done when they arrested him. They took pity on Columbus and ordered that he be released from jail. All right, so he did a lot of wrong things and he was put in jail, but now they feel sorry for him, so they're letting him out of jail. So it says, your next question, why did they free Columbus? They freed him because they set Columbus free and ordered his share of the wealth to be returned to him. Their Majesty shattered Columbus's dreams of returning to his former importance by announcing, "You are free, but you will no longer be the governor of our new empire." An empire is like a kingdom. They put someone new in charge of Hispaniola and the lands beyond. The king and queen told Columbus, "We will give you one last chance to find the wealth of Asia." They gave him a few old ships that hardly seemed strong enough to make it out of the harbor onto the open sea. So Columbus took those rotting Spanish ships safely across the Atlantic. Sailing up and down the lush green coast, he searched once more for the Asian cities he still believed must be there. Of course, they were not, and not finding them, he did not go ashore to explore. Discouraged, Columbus returned to Spain once again without the gold and spices that he desired. Okay, so why couldn't he find the Asian cities? Where was he really? Christopher Columbus never set sail again. He died still believing that he had found the Indies, but other explorers disagreed. They realized that instead of Asia, Columbus had actually found a place that Europeans had never known about between Asia and Europe. Because they had never before known about this place and it was new to them, they called it the New World. Today, every year on October 12th, Americans remember Christopher Columbus's arrival in the Americas back in 1492. This day is called Columbus Day. Later, you will learn about a group of people called the Vikings who came to North America even before Columbus did. Historians from many countries have researched and retold the story of Christopher Columbus many times over. It means different things to different people, but one thing we know for sure is that Columbus's mistake changed the world. All right, so that's the end of that read aloud. I know that the name of that holiday, Columbus Day, has changed in some places. I think in some places it's called Indigenous People Day now to help remember the Native Americans. Instead of Christopher Columbus. So I got a few questions for you to think about with your family. One is, what did Columbus think he had found? Where did he think he was? And then where had he been trying to go to? Okay, talk about it with your family. And then next one, what reasons does the author of the Read Aloud give to support the statement that the king and queen were upset with Columbus? So how do you know that the king and queen were upset or angry with him? What did they do to him to show that they were angry or upset? There's a few clues in there. Okay, and then last question. Native Americans had been living in the Americas for thousands of years. The New World wasn't really new except for to the people from Europe. Once people in Europe heard about the new land between Europe and Asia, what do you think they did? So once people finally did find out about this land and knew that it was there, what do you think all these people from Europe decided to do? Okay. Thanks for talking with your families, and I hope you're learning a lot. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.